Hello, folks. This is James Arnold, host of the Hawks Watch podcast here today, coming back with another episode to cover the recent trades the Hawks have made this last week. It's been a super busy week for them. We'll cover the Porzingis trade, their new draft pick, Asa Newell, and really just the masterclass that the new GM, Onsi has put on in the last week and really changed the direction and upside that the Hawks have going into next year and for the next few years as well. Let's start with the Porzingis trade here. So the Hawks gave up Terrence Mann, George Niang, and the 22nd pick in the draft for Porzingis. Now, Porzingis is on an expiring deal this year. We'll see what happens if he's going to get extended. I'm not worried about all of that right now. We got the 7-foot big man who can shoot threes at a very high level that Hawks fans and the Hawks organization seemingly have, been trying to get in the building for the last several years. This trade accomplishes a few things. The Hawks now have a cleaner cap sheet. The books have been cleared. They moved off of Terrence Mann and his contract, which was, probably their only bad, questionable contract that they had. They had to pay him. I think the contract was somewhere around $15 million a year for 3 more years, which is a lot of money for what you're getting with Terrence Mann. So, importantly, they moved off of his contract in this trade, kind of cleared the books there, and got a huge player for them. They also sent out the 22nd pick in the draft, which, importantly, they kept pick 13, which is super important due to the next trade that they made, which, we'll talk about in a bit here. From a value standpoint, this trade is a huge win. Hawks fans are used to giving up way too much for, star level or borderline, just really good players, right? Like Porzingis. In this case, they only gave up 1 pick, later in the first round, cleared a, negative value contract, and kept the $25 million trade exception, which could be huge later on. That, I believe, has to be used by July 7th. So potentially, in the next week or so, we may see some more moves. There's a lot that the Hawks have to do in the next, few months of the offseason to build out the rest of the roster, make sure it has, decent depth. But this is a really good start and trajectory, to start the offseason with. All right, so let's talk about the on-court impact of Porzingis as well. So if you're unfamiliar with his game, Porzingis is known as a 7'2", 7'3", big man who can shoot, really shoot the 3 ball. He's about 40% from 3. That is huge for the Hawks. this forces the opposing center out of the paint. Porzingis has to be guarded on the 3-point line. You can't, if they leave their center in the paint, well, Porzingis is going to kill you from three, and that's, pretty much game over. So the opposing big has to guard him on the 3-point line. This gives Trae Young, all of the Hawks guards a lot more space to operate, which has been a massive constraint of the last few years where there hasn't been a lot of good spacing. They've had Clint Capella for years, as the starter, not really, just a complete non-shooter, pretty much no offensive skill, and he's lost a lot of his burst, so wasn't even spacing, the floor vertically, by being able to finish lobs at a high level, etc. So, the Hawks have just had a lot of spacing issues. They haven't had a lot of elite shooting on the wings or with their big men. It's an area where Onyeka really progressed later in the season this last year, but still nothing like what Porzingis offers. That, he offers truly elite shooting at the 5 and really for even guard players. Like if he was a guard, he's a really good shooter. And it's just special, at 7'2", to have that skill set. And, he has other offensive skills. He's, good touch. He's not a bruiser in the paint or anything, but, more of a finesse big, has a lot of good skill. So offensively, it's going to unlock a lot, especially in the half court. It's going to create more space for the guards to operate. And, guys like Dyson, right? A strong driver. Well, used to be that, he'd have to go, take his man and, try to finish over the shot blocker in the paint. Well, the big now has to be out in the corner or wing guarding Porzingis. He's not able to contest that shot, so he just has to take on his man, or if someone rotates from the weak side, he can kick it out to whoever, collapses. It just, makes it a lot easier rather than, having a big in the paint affecting almost every shot at the rim. And, the Hawks had one of the best shot profiles in the league last season when it comes to, taking shots at the rim and from three, like the, statistical models. They weren't taking a lot of mid-range shots. They were, really creating those elite, percentage attempts, those efficient attempts at the rim and from three. The problem is they weren't, making them consistently because spacing wasn't there. They didn't have a whole lot of, great shooters from three either. So Porzingis helps fix that pretty much immediately. Again, Onyeka's made strides as a shooter, but Porzingis is just in a different tier there. And, it's interesting too, Porzingis can play with Onyeka. It doesn't have to be one or the other. A lot of teams are playing these two big lineups these days, and, the Hawks have that option now. With Porzingis, Onyeka can play the four, and even Jalen can play the 3 with them. It's not his ideal spot, but he can certainly play that spot. Defensively, Porzingis brings rim protection, top 10 to 20 shot blocker in the league by most, advanced metrics and stats models. He's not a great transition player or, defending in space, but again, in the half court, he just makes a world of difference. His presence unlocks a bunch of lineup versatility for the Hawks, and you can run him with Jalen, Onyeka, even all three together for, a monster defensive, rotation there. The only, real concern with Porzingis is health, right? He's dealt with injuries on and off throughout his whole career, but if the Hawks can manage his minutes and the workload, I think the upside of bringing him, far outweighs any health risks that you have with him. It just bumps up the ceiling of what this Hawks team can achieve and the optionality that they have on the court, as far as lineups, schemes, versatility that they have now that they have just never had in the Trae Young era. So this is going to be a game changer. I think it's a fantastic move for the Hawks, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Hawks fan, right? This is truly, this doesn't feel like a trade that we've been able to pull off, in the past. I just think it's really a game changer for the team, and super excited about seeing how it works on the court, and should raise the ceiling of the team this season by a lot. So I'll move on, talk about the second transaction that was made this week, and Asa Newell and the draft. Okay, so moving on to the draft, the Hawks pulled off a draft day heist, an absolute heist of a trade on draft night. It was super impressive and really helps the future of the organization. So after sending the 22nd pick to Boston in the Porzingis deal, the Hawks were left with just the 13th pick in this year's draft on Wednesday. Now, if you heard my last episode, I was really hoping that Colin Murray-Boyles would fall to the Hawks at 13. But he went at 9, and then my second guy, Cedric Coward, came off the board at pick 11. And so, once the board kind of shifted there, neither of those guys was going to fall. There was a group of players that were pretty much in the same tier, a bunch of them. And Onsi said this afterwards in his press conference too. He said, they have a bucket of players that were pretty much in the same range that they had in the same tier. So, when that happens, just makes sense to move back and pick up some value there. So the Hawks made a trade. They traded the 13th pick for the 23rd pick in the draft on Wednesday, and a 2026 unprotected first-round pick, which is going to be the better of either Milwaukee's first-round pick or New Orleans pick next year. Now, that is incredible value. A national, NBA writer and podcaster called that pick, one of the most valuable assets in the NBA right now. And the reason is that both Milwaukee and New Orleans, they might be in rough shape next year. The Pelicans traded away McCollum. DeJounte's coming off an injury. They spent, our 13th pick on Derek Queen to pair him with Zion, which might just be a bit of a mess, to be honest. No one really knows what's going on with the Pelicans, even nationally. I mean, people just did not know why they did this trade. Anyway, the Pelicans, they look like they're in for a rough year. The Bucks also have a lot of uncertainty. They might be trading Giannis. Their roster is super thin. And so, all of that could come crashing down. It's very likely that either the Bucks or Pelicans pick is going to be in the lottery. And then all you need from there, if you're the Hawks, is the ping pong balls to fall right. And you're talking about, top 5 pick that you have, maybe even number 1. It's completely unprotected. So the upside is sky high. All for moving back 10 picks in a draft where you pretty much had the rest of the guys in the first round in pretty much the same tier, So, I mean, that's just A+ stuff. You can't get any better than that. I was actually joking on Twitter that the, Hawks and Pelicans had some sort of secret agreement, because this is the second straight year in which the Hawks have absolutely fleeced the Pelicans in a trade. First last year with the Dyson and 2 first-round picks for DeJounte, and now this. It's also worth noting, I don't know how much this actually plays in, but I was just thinking about it. A couple episodes ago, I had mentioned, the Hawks' new hire in the front office in Bryson Graham, who was the former New Orleans Pelicans GM. And it just makes you wonder, if he just knew how much New Orleans wanted Derek Queen or what their plans were, and was able to kind of use that as leverage, tell Onsi, hey, they really want a certain guy in this draft. You have a lot of leverage there. Try to get that pick and trade once Colin Murray Boyles, kind of fell out of the picture there. So, I mean, good stuff. You could not have asked for, a better couple trades from the new GM of the Hawks, Onsi Soleil, in his first few months in the job. You just couldn't ask for better. It's a fantastic start to the Onsi era, and hopefully, this sort of thing continues. All right, so let's move on to the pick that the Hawks did make at 23. So, we traded the 13th pick. We have the 23rd pick now. And, there was a couple guys falling there, at the top of my board at that point. It was going to be Asa Newell or Rasheer Fleming. Fleming actually, I don't know what happened, but he did not get picked in the first round. And then I believe was the 31st pick in the second round. But the Hawks ended up taking Asa Newell, who played at Georgia. He's actually from Atlanta. He's a player that reportedly they had pretty high on their board. So a few things to know about Asa. He's a rangy, athletic, tweener big. So, play the 4, play the 5. He's kind of in between there. He's known for his athleticism and his defense. He has a high motor, super energetic, long, good mobility. Offensively, he's pretty raw. He hasn't shown much skill there yet, but, he's very young. If he's able to develop his shot and, turns into a corner three spot up shooter, kind of like a John Collins light type. This becomes just a great depth piece for the Hawks. I don't expect him to play a lot of minutes right away, especially not with Jalen, Onyeka, Porzingis in front of him. But in the case of an injury, particularly if Jalen goes down, Asa brings that size defensively and energy that, in the recent years, the Hawks have lacked, right? I mean, when Jalen went down, there's just been too many stretches of the last couple seasons where the Hawks have lacked size with, maybe DeAndre Hunter's down, Jalen's down, Onyeka's down, and we just don't have the size to compete, and kind of forces us to make either all offensive or all defensive lineups, and they could never really strike a balance there to where they could put a two-way lineup out there with all the injuries that we've had. So, at least with this pick, if we do have, injuries this year, at least Asa has the size and athleticism to slot in there. I think he can pretty much hold his own on defense. Offensively, again, right now would be a tough fit, but at least you'd be able to put him out there, have some size, and, have someone that can run to the rim, grab some rebounds, even though that's not his greatest strength currently. He just has the size and athleticism that we've been lacking in that area last couple of years when people have gotten hurt. So I'd imagine, assuming reasonable health for the Hawks, that he's going to spend a good chunk of the season in the G League and College Park. But again, if injuries kind of open up minutes, he may be able to slot in there and help out. As a long-term piece, I think it's great. This year, sure, I don't think he's probably going to provide a lot of value. Most rookies do not. But long-term, great depth piece. He seems like a super high-character guy as well. It's something that Onsi kind of raved about, and just watching the press conference and his interviews so far, seems like a great kid. So, really good addition to the Hawks' future, and a fine pick at 23. Good value there, especially taking into account the trade and all that went on that night. So, we have to move on, talk a little bit about free agency, take a look forward. From here, I believe, again, that $25 million trade player exception has to be used by July 7th. So potentially, if they're going to use that, there could be some big news coming in the next week. I know, they're targeting guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They need a defensive wing. They need some wing depth right now. They need to sign Karis LeVert back to a deal that'll help. But even beyond that, they'll probably need another guy so that you're not having to, play V. Krejci at the wing position. You ideally want him to play, the two, the backup two or something like that, rather than have to match up with these bigger, stronger guys. So, need a couple more wings. Hopefully one of them's Karis LeVert, and then, get another guy there. I don't know what the plan is as far as, having Muhammad Gay be the backup power forward, or, what the rest of the roster is going to look like. But, this offseason will be interesting. really if they can fill out the depth and get some decent players around this really good core that they've built, we should be able to really compete and potentially, contend for a title in the next 1 or 2 years. It's clear with these moves the Hawks are trying to win. They're in a good position to do so. They've also, with that trade that they made on draft night, that helps their future as far as having draft assets and more options that they can go to kind of build out this roster and trade or, whatever it may be. So we'll keep our eyes peeled. I believe free agency starts on Monday, so I might be coming to you guys with an episode again next week after some sort of sign-in trade that the Hawks do, or, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, again, we can get Karis LeVert and then target another wing, but we'll see. And, I appreciate everyone listening. It's been exciting. It's been an exciting week for the Hawks. Follow me on Instagram. You can find me at Hawks Watch Pod. I'm on Twitter at HawksWatch99. Again, I really appreciate everyone listening and supporting the podcast here. It means a lot, and hopefully you guys get some value and enjoy listening to this and my insights here. Without further ado, I will let the music play here, and I'll talk to you guys next episode.